same
Uh,
copy.
so, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. For those of you who are logging in afterwards to watch the recording, then welcome to you also. So this is just a very quick run
Joe
through
willing and
of
join
the
this meeting. Budget.
Chancellor's budget update that happened on a Wednesday. So, for those of you that are on the call, if you could just mute yourselves, I'm happy to take questions as we go or at the end. More than happy with that. But just to avoid any background noise, if we could just mute ourselves while we're watching and listening, that'd be great. So just as a sort of a general overview, the Chancellor insisted that the economy has turned a corner. He talked about this being a budget for growth. He says he's delivered on the Prime Minister's three economic priorities. Inflation has fallen. I'm not sure how he can take credit for that, but that's what he says. Growth has been more resilient than expected, and the debt is forecast to fall. So there we go. It's taking credit for all of those things. So the Office for Budget Responsibility is forecasting inflation below 2%, which is great. Growth has been lower than forecasted. The IMF now thinks that UK will have the third fastest cumulative growth in the G7 over 24 to 2028. Mr. Hunt says that debt and borrowing fiscal rules are on track to be met. So we'll see about that, but that's what he's saying. So that's kind of the backdrop of where we are, and possibly why cuts were perhaps not as drastic as perhaps some were forecasting them to be. So we'll move on. So slide one, please. Yeah. So business. There was strikingly little for business, if I'm honest. No reduction in employers' national insurance contributions. No adjustment to the main corporation tax rate of 25%. Obviously, we'd seen that rocket. It had been announced a few years ago, but that came in a year ago, and that had gone up from 19 to 25% as the main corporation tax rate. So and no change to that, and many sort of Tory backbenchers were certainly calling for that. For small business, it was announced that the VAT registration threshold was to increase from 85,000 to 90,000. That comes in April 24. Relatively small increase, not really sufficient. Certainly not in my view, certainly not in the view of many commentators, to be quite frank. The first increase in over 7 years, it's been frozen there. There's also been some adjustments to the level where you deregister as well, which is similar to that increase as well. Nowhere near where it should have been. We should have been up at 120, 150,000 really to make any real difference there. But for those that are teetering on the level on that threshold, yeah, might be of interest. Perhaps a wider interest, although still maybe not that wide of interest. The extension of the full expensing. So in the autumn statement, we saw that the government made full expensing permanent. So this is where you can write off the full cost of plant and machinery against your taxable profits. But there was an exemption for those assets which are in place for leasing. This is to be rolled out now for those assets that you hold for leasing. There isn't an indication on timing for this because it's quite an expensive measure for the government. But they're certainly consulting on it. So that was something else. In terms of whether that has a massive impact on you as a small business, you've already got £1 million worth of annual investment allowance from a capital allowances point of view. So unless you're big into leasing plant and equipment, so you're a big plant hire company or car hire or something along those sorts of lines, this is probably going to have very little impact on you. But still a positive impact area, I suppose. One area that did get some attention was the creative industry reliefs. I'm not going to bang on too much about that because I can't imagine many of our members having too much of an interest in this. But if you're a new independent film creator, if you're into touring or permanent theatre productions, then there's some really good increases in tax credits and reliefs for you, and we can read about those in the summaries that we can send out to you after this presentation. The third iteration of the recovery loan scheme is it was due to end in June 24. It's now going to be extended and renamed, because we like to rename stuff. So it's going to be the growth guarantee scheme. Basically, it's a 70% guaranteed loan, and there's going to be 2 million of finance available for small business. It's not a massive scheme. Lenders are generally not particularly keen on lending through it, but it is there. And under the right circumstances, it might be useful for small business. So it is there, and it has been extended. One of the big blows, I suppose, if you're into this sort of thing, was the furnished holiday lettings regime being abolished. So we had a tax advantage for landlords who let out short-term furnished holiday properties. So the tax effects of sort of having full interest payments cover allowance, that was cool, and we had capital allowances. We paid lower capital gains tax when we sold properties. We had rollover relief. There were lots of really good allowances and reliefs within furnished holiday lettings, which are now all going. So that's a bit of a shame. We're assuming that the rationale behind this is to kind of free up a bit of the housing market and turn that back into more of a long-term lettings market. So the second and third homes are being taken off of the holiday lettings market and put back into the general housing stock. That's what we think the rationale for that is. Encouragement by the government, but we'll wait and see if that has an impact. So next slide, please.
Kevin, can I ask one question? Sorry,
Yeah,
on
of course you can.
slide.
Yeah.
On the
Yeah.
VAT thresholds.
Yes.
Obviously, that was a £5,000 change there.
It was.
Did the Chancellor give any indication of how many businesses were anticipated to benefit from that particular change? Do you know?
Yes, he did. Yeah, 27,000, I believe, was the number, and that's entirely off the top of my head. So if I've got that wrong, I apologise. But it's a very low number given the number of businesses there are in the UK. When I read the number, I thought, oh, Christ, that's very small. So 27,000, I believe, it was the number, but either way, it's very small. As I say, it was a paltry provision as far as I was concerned. It doesn't even keep up to date with fiscal drag. So it's a positive for those. If you're in that £27,000 27,000 businesses, but otherwise, it's hardly touches the sides really. So
Great, thank you.
No worries. So we're now on to individuals. So if you're an individual, perhaps you had a slightly better time than the businesses. As previously announced, personal tax thresholds were to be frozen until April 2028. So the press have made quite a big thing of this. It wasn't really announced in the budget. It was just reaffirmed, really. So the personal allowance levels, the the thresholds, the basic rate bandings, and the higher rate bandings have all been frozen, as well as the additional rate thresholds coming down from 150 to 125,140. So that has all been previously announced. So nothing new there. But it doesn't help anything. I mentioned fiscal drag earlier on. It just means that we're bringing more people into paying higher rates of tax. We're bringing more people into the tax regime itself. So it's not great from that sort of point of view. However, we did try and mitigate this, or the Chancellor did, by a 2% cut in national insurance. So 8% cuts to 8% for the self-employed class 4 national insurance will now be 6%. So 2% cut there, and there'll also be the NIC cut on sort of general class 1 national insurance as well. The Chancellor is hinting that one day he wants to get rid of national insurance entirely. I think that's probably a pipe dream, if I'm honest. But it's there. The reason that this was a national insurance cut rather than a sort of a general income tax cut was that he wanted to target working people. So that's quite important. That I don't think many of us, particularly those that work, will see a difference between whether it's a national insurance cut or an income tax cut. It all just comes off the tax line, really. But of course, by doing this, it means that you don't give a benefit to the retired investors and those sorts of people. Capital gains tax and things like that. So what you do, it is purely for those people that are working and chargeable to national insurance. So that was a positive. 2% is going to cost the Exchequer a lot of money. So that's worth bearing in mind. Another point to make there as well, and this is not clear cut, but it may now be worth speaking to your accountant about if you're an owner managed business, a company, you've probably your accountant's probably been talking to you over the last sort of 10 years about taking dividends rather than salary, with a small level of salary and then topping the rest up with dividends. It's possible that this reduction in NIC without any reduction in the rate of dividend tax, as there isn't one, might now tip the scales in the favour of actually paying more in the way of salary than dividends. But that whole discussion has a huge number of different parameters involved, so it won't be the same for everybody. So you need to have a word with your accountant about that, about what is right for you and your business, your circumstances. But just one for the horizon, really. Have a look at that. The Chancellor gleefully stole the Labour Party's planned abolition of non-dom tax status, although he said it was Nigel Lawson's idea. So, I don't get involved in political dung flinging, but there we go. The rules enable non-UK domiciled individuals living in the UK to avoid UK tax by keeping overseas income and gains offshore. But from April 25 now, those gains will come back into the UK tax system for the first 4 years of residence in the UK. They'll be exempt, but after year 5, they're going to be taxed. You'll be, as a non-dom, you'll be taxed on your worldwide income in the same way as any UK resident as well. So that's the change there. There will be some transitional measures to ease matters for those poor non-doms who have clearly not got enough money to pay that tax. It is widely recognised that the high income child benefit tax is suboptimal, unfair, perhaps is another word for it, and it is. So under this regime, the child benefit is clawed back where families where at least one parent earns over £50,000. So this means that if you're a married couple, you can earn between you 99,000, but as long as neither of you go over the £50,000 mark, you don't get it clawed back. But if as a family, one of you doesn't work and the other one earns, £51,000, it gets clawed back. So it seems that there's sort of an unequitable situation there. So from 2026, the level is going to go up to 60,000. The clawback will be between 60,000 and 80,000. So the clawback percentage period has been increased as well. So that's helpful. That position of being unfair is still there because it's still on that one main earner. But there are consultations out about actually moving that across a family-based income rather than sole earners. So there's still a little bit more work to do on that piece, but the trajectory of travel is probably correct. Residential property. So individuals disposing of that currently, sort of their high tax rate is 28%. The basic rate band is 18%. From April 24, this rate's going to be reduced to 24%. So slightly better tax rate. And again, I think this is probably to try and free up again some of the housing stock. Instead of people sat on residential property, let's get some of it back and see if we can get it into the hands of first-time buyers and things like that. So I think it's to sort of kickstart the housing market. I think that's what that's for. A new UK ISA. It's exciting, isn't it? You can have an additional 5,000. That's on top of the £20,000 allowance that you've already got. And this money is going to be invested solely in all those UK companies that we've got. There's no real detail on that yet. Lots of consultation going on that. So watch that space and get your £5,000 checks ready to get invested in that. Also a British savings bond coming through the National Savings and Investments. I imagine the interest rate's going to be sky high for that one. So that's going to be launched in April 24. So keep your beady eye on that one. It's going to have a fixed interest rate for 3 years. So again, for those of you that are really keen on savings out there may well be an opportunity there. No substantive changes to inheritance tax. So that's interesting. There were a lot of commentators out there that were predicting that. But there were a couple of small things. Agricultural property relief and woodland relief would be restricted to property. So there was just a very small sort of caveat that came in, but nothing that we were expecting. Alcohol duty to be frozen until February 25. However, the Chancellor also introduced a duty on vaping products that will come in from October 26, as well as a one-off increase in tobacco duty at the same time. It is worth remembering that these tax cuts are dwarfed by the increases in fiscal drag. So I mentioned fiscal drag a number of times throughout the presentation, but that is still as inflation has flown through the roof over the recent years. The percentage of tax that's being taken goes up, and therefore without the allowances and reliefs sort of going up in line with inflation, then we're going to get this fiscal drag. Okay. So another slide, please, Mr. Chris Whitty. Thank you. Stamp duty, land tax. So this is sort of other matters that I couldn't fit into anywhere else, really. So yeah, we're getting rid of multiple dwellings relief. So I don't know how much this impacts anyone, in the room today or watching. But for those that possibly get involved in developments and property generally, then this was a fairly valuable relief, which we're getting rid of. So it's there it goes, it's gone. And again, this is probably a provision that is attempting to free up some housing stock for long-term letting and first-time buyers. So that's probably where we are with that. So another sort of provision to try and ease government policy, I would suggest. And then some additional resources from for HMRC. So I think we're all aware that the HMRC service standards are shocking. So they're getting a bit more money to see whether they can actually service their clients, who are the taxpayer, a little bit better. So they're going to concentrate on digitization and some other things. But it's exciting times for HMRC, I'm sure. That they're going to get a little bit more money, and possibly come after us a little bit harder when it comes to collecting debt, and actually looking at tax avoidance, tax evasion, and clamping down on those sorts of things as well. So there might be an upturn in investigations generally, which is never a welcome thing. But if it's for those who are serial offenders, should we say, that's it is a good thing to get the money out of them, so that not the rest of us aren't paying for it. So I think that's it from the budget. I mean, there were lots of other little bits. There's a huge amount of detail that's thrown in, but thank you very much for listening. I'm happy to take any questions. I've literally ran up to time, although I think we started a few minutes late, so I can be accepted, I think. But yeah, if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them. But yes, over to you for questions, or we'll close it down, and happy to take questions post the webinar.
Yeah.
Very useful. Thanks, Gav.
Gavin, thank you for your time. Any questions that come through, we will direct to you. So thank you for your time in doing that. And thanks for those for attending today.
Lovely. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. See you shortly.
Cheers, Eric. Take care, mate.
Bye.